contains 95% of natural ingredients. That claim, we see it now everywhere. That doesn't mean that the 5% that remain are not trash, but what if you want to launch a product and you don't want your product to be deceptive, but you don't really know if the claim that you have in mind will make you a target of regulatory authorities? Because in some cases, you may be accused of being misleading to your consumers, or being deceptive, or to play an unfair competitive game. If you are thinking about using a free-form claim, there is a few things regarding regulation that you need to know that can differ depending on if you want to launch your product in Europe or in the US. Let's talk about it. First, a free-from claim is basically suggesting that your product does not contain a specific ingredient. While they can appeal to the consumers, they are highly regulatory minefield, especially in Europe, where the authorities work really hard to avoid any product with misleading or unjustified claim to be launched. There are different types of examples for these free-from claims. Ingredient-based, for example, paraben-free or sulfate-free, silicone-free, and so on. There is also the categorical absence claims regarding a whole category of ingredients, like chemical-free or preservative-free, toxin-free. Then there are negative characteristic claims that focus on what your product doesn't do, like non-toxic or non-irritating, non-comedogenic. And finally, the ethical production claim that relates to sourcing, production methods, or testing, like cruelty-free or palm oil-free. Each type have different regulatory consideration, and some are more riskier than others. Let's look in all these examples what is allowed and what is not. Let's start with the EU, which is known for its more rigorous approach to cosmetic regulation. So the main regulation for cosmetic, as you probably know, is the regulation number 1223/2009, and if you want the one specific to cosmetic claims, you will have to refer to the regulation number 655/2013. If you have a free-form claim, this regulation sets 6 criteria for cosmetic claiming. It must be legally compliant. For example, you cannot claim a free-form ingredient that is already legally banned. Second, truthfulness, meaning that your claim must be factually accurate. The claim must have evidence support, always have documentation to back up your claim. Another criteria is honesty. That means that you cannot denigrate legal ingredients or your competitors. Next one is fairness. You are not legally allowed to create confusion with other products. And finally, informed decision making that allow consumers to make a choice based on actual facts. In 2019, EU issued specific guidance on free-form claims. This guidance is not always law-binding, but it is for best practices. Legal action can vary depending on the region. Some countries will treat this as an act of violation, while some others may think that it is just advisory rule. So if you want to flirt with this rule, it's up to you, but you cannot tell that you have not been warned. Now let's look what is happening across the Atlantic in the US. The regulatory landscape has changed since the modernization of Cosmetic Regulation Act, or the MOCRA, in 2022, but it's still less rigid than in Europe. The FDA does not pre-approve any cosmetic claims for your product. However, all claims must be truthful and not misleading. If a claim implies therapeutic benefits, such as, for example, treats acne, your product may be classified as a drug and it will trigger much stricter regulatory requirements. So in the US, free-form claims are allowed. There is no specific guideline regarding that compared to Europe. But what FDA really doesn't want is for your product claim to be deceptive. That's a no-go. The Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, also monitor advertising claims for truthfulness and not misleading. They also require that your claims have reasonable bases and scientific evidence. But what if you want to launch a product and you don't want to mislead the consumers, you don't want your product to be deceptive, but you don't really know if the claim that you have in mind will make you a target of regulatory authorities? Let me give you some examples of problematic claims. You will have a better idea of what you should not do. So for the free-from claim, let me give you some concrete example. You cannot claim free-from parabens because by mentioning that, you let assume to the consumers that all your competitors have products that contain parabens, when actually paraben is banned for your specific product type category. Another example, if you claim that your product is benzoic acid free, for example. You let the consumer assume that benzoic acid is something that they don't want in your cosmetic product, and thus that it's unsafe, when actually benzoic acid is a legal ingredient that you can use. By doing that, you definitely denigrate the ingredients, which is completely misleading and unfair to your competitors. If you claim that your product is chemical-free, all ingredients are chemical, even water is a chemical, it is very misleading. Preservative-free. If you have 1 ounce of water in your product and you claim that your product is preservative-free, it is a red flag about product safety. Regarding the toxic-free or non-toxic claims, these claims imply that other products are toxic, other products contain toxic ingredients, which completely denigrate the EU's prohibitions on denigrating legal ingredients. They are also quite vague. What is actually a toxin? Again, do your research when you are at the step of finding the right claim for your product. Because if you claim, for example, that your product is mercury-free, or free from any legally banned ingredient, it is considered misleading because no one is using mercury anymore since it's a banned ingredient, so mention it is quite unfair for your competitors. And the last example that is a little bit subtle is, for example, for the fragrance-free claim. Because if you are developing a product that contains masking agents or essential oils, claiming that your product is fragrance-free can be considered deceptive because there may be some intrinsic fragrance within those essential oils or masking agents. So what free-from claims can you make safely? That's the question. Here is the approach that generally comply with regulations. If you have a specific ingredients absence claim, when accurate and not degrading, you can state that an ingredient is absent from your formula. Remember that this ingredient should not be already banned by the regulations, and the key is to avoid any language that would suggest that this legal ingredient is harmful. So for example, it should be fine to claim that your product is formulated without parabens. See how this is subtle? Or no added sulfates, meaning that if there is sulfates intrinsically in the competitor's formulation, it is not harmful. If you have some also in your product, it is not harmful, but you have not added some more. What also should be fine is, instead of doing negative formulation statement, try to make positive statement and highlight the benefit of some ingredients. For example, my product is formulated with plant-based ingredients. Consumers will love that. Or made with organic shea butter, or contains 95% of natural ingredients. That claim, we see it now everywhere. That doesn't mean that the 5% that remain are not trash, but another type of claim that will highlight the benefits of your product is to use a third-party certification. This provides credibility and compliance. For example, if you state that your product is EWG verified for cosmetic transparency, or if your product has the Cosmo or Naturo certification, or if you can state that your product is certified PETA for non-cruelty. Finally, what the consumer will always enjoy is for you to be transparent regarding your formulation. For example, as part of your cosmetic branding, you can communicate on the full list of ingredients within your formulation. Explain why you have chosen a specific preservative system compared to another, why you could only add a specific percentage of the active ingredient in your formulation. Basically, educate your future consumers regarding the choices that you have made for your cosmetic product. You thought that I will end this video without talking a little bit about documentation. That's not knowing me. I mean, you should know by now. Whatever free claim you are choosing, you need proper documentation. The formula documentation, the tasting documentation if applicable, the certification documentation, and the marketing review process. If you want to start gathering information data now and checklist information that would be required to put in your PIF later, check my PIF checklist tool package that I have created. Link in the description, or you can find it on my website cosmeticlabs.com. Remember that when in doubt, consult an expert, a regulatory expert. They may tell you that depending on the claims that you are targeting or the product type that you want to develop, the requirement for the PIF may differ. Click on this video to know more about that, or on this one because there are much things that you cannot do in cosmetic claiming.